I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but where did the fish go? And before I can answer that question, you have to understand what once was. So let's go back in time. Early pilgrims in what is now known as the United States of America once said that you couldn't step foot in the shallow waters without stepping on a lobster. That's how prevalent they were. Descriptions of the time spoke of salmon, saying if you wanted 5 of them to feed a group of people, stick a pitchfork in the water and pull it out, and there will be at least 5 on the end. Another account spoke of entire mounds of massive clams off the East Coast that you literally had to avoid hitting with your ship or risk being beached. Another claimed you could practically walk to Greenland on the backs of cod. And it wasn't just the quantity of fish, it was also the quality of them. They were huge. I'm going to show you some pictures, and a lot of these were taken within the last 70 years or so, and it's deeply troubling to see the change over time. For generations, families have come to Key West, Florida to compete in a deep sea fishing contest. At the end of the day, everyone involved is invited to take their biggest fish and hook it onto the hanging board. This picture is from the 1950s. Look at the size of those fish. While it's sad to see something that massive and majestic hanging dead, don't focus on that detail. Instead, focus on the size of the fish. Here's another photo from the 1950s. Yet again, absolutely massive fish. Easily as big or bigger than a male's torso. I mean, look at the comparison between them and the people who caught them. It's absolutely ridiculous. Now we're going to go ahead and jump into the 1960s. Look at the radical shift in size of these fish. Out of all these fish here, there's only one that's similar to the sizes of the decade before. Above them, you can see fish of much smaller sizes. And if you haven't caught on yet, we aren't catching these massive fish anymore because they're going extinct. Be it overfishing, pollution, extinction, plastics, a rising ocean temperature, there are many reasons why. But I'm not done yet. Oh no, not by a long shot. Now we enter the 1970s, still in the same place in Key West, Florida. Look at the difference now. It's jarring. Where did all the massive fish go? But let's say for a second that maybe you are unconvinced. None of this is compelling to you. Maybe back then they just got lucky and caught some big fish. So let's keep moving. Maybe that was all the luck of fishing, or maybe it's the skill of the fishermen. Let's move into the 1980s. Once again, a massive decrease in size. These people caught more fish than ever before as technology had improved, but the overall size of these fish is much smaller than even a decade before, let alone multiple decades before back in the 1950s. In fact, in 1988, global fish catching peaked at 80 million metric tons. Since then, the global catch has declined 500,000 metric tons per year, meaning humanity reached the peak of fishing in 1988. And ever since then, it's only been going downhill. Whatever existed in 1988, it's only decreased ever since because humans got too good at catching. It's an unsettling thought considering Earth's population in 1988 was 5.1 billion people, and now it's 8.1 billion people. The fish are going to get lower and lower and lower and lower. More people, more mouths to feed, less fish. It isn't a hard equation to figure out. Things will only get worse before they get better. And speaking of worse, in 2016, a long-running study discovered that the number of fish caught globally is dramatically underreported by about 30%, which means the chart looks like this now, which is even worse than anyone predicted. These are the winners of the deep sea fishing contest in 2007. If you didn't know the historical context, you'd say, wow, I caught some big fish. But now that you do know how big they were just 50 years ago, this is devastating. This is horrifying. The latest video I could find of this same fishing company was from 2015. And in this video I'm about to show you, it's going to show a man enthusiastically showing off his very huge, massive catch. Watch this. Compare this catch to the photos from the 1950s. The difference is stark. But let's go back even further. Here is a photo from 1903. This is not fake. This is not altered. Yes, fish literally got to be this big. It's unbelievable from our current understanding of how fish should be. In fact, let's look at a ton of photos of people from the past and their massive catches. Before we took fishing and catching to its natural conclusion of overfishing and overcatching, life had the opportunity to grow. Fish could grow massive with enough food, space, and few predators. This phenomenon isn't limited just to fish and aquatic life though. Think back to our ancient history. when woolly mammoths and humans roamed the earth at the same time. Humans hunted them to extinction. There was a time where massive 12 feet tall ground sloths roamed the ancient North, Central, and Southern America. They were hunted to extinction by humans as well. The list goes on and on. Humans consistently make the same mistake of taking for granted what resources they have and overusing them. Swiss explorer Francis Louis Michel in 1701 wrote of the abundance of fish in early America. He said, "The water is no less prolific because an indescribably large number of big and little fish are found in many creeks, as well as in the large rivers. The abundance is so great, and they are so easily caught that I was much surprised. Those who have a line can catch as many as they please. I know from personal experience from when I went out several times with the line, I was surprised that I could pull up one fish after another, and through the clear water I could see large numbers of all kinds, whose names were unknown to me. They cannot be compared with our fish." The sturgeon is another example of fish disappearing. Fossil records of sturgeon date back more than 260 million years. Today there are 25 different species of sturgeon worldwide, and 9 species of sturgeon are listed as either threatened or endangered under the Endangered Species Act. And as it turns out, one of the most endangered types of sturgeon is located in the Chesapeake Bay. I bring all this up to say this wasn't always the case. Here is a quote from an English traveler named Andrew Burnaby in 1759. "Sturgeon are in such prodigious numbers that one day within the space of 2 miles only, some gentlemen in canoes caught above 600 with hooks." Let's not just get hung up on fish. No account of early Chesapeake Bay are complete without descriptions of the vast amount of oysters. Scientists estimate that before the arrival of Europeans, there were enough oysters in the estuary to filter the bay's entire water volume in 1 to 3 days. Today, with oysters at only 2% of their historic levels, the same process takes over a year. Then we have the Great Oyster Mounds, which had built up over time. These mounds were so large that they stuck out above the water at low tide and posed navigational hazards to ships. Foreign travelers were consistently amazed at the oyster's size and quality. Now, there are extensive efforts to restore the Chesapeake Bay's oyster population, but we'll never again see what used to be. One account from 1612 by William Strachey wrote that some oysters were 13 inches long and that you had to cut them in half to eat them. Today, the Guinness World Record for an oyster is around 13 inches long, meaning today's largest ever was just a common sight back then. Now it's a freak anomaly that managed to avoid capture long enough to grow to a large size. Like every resource, animal, mineral, or product, we have extracted as much as possible with reckless abandon. The future be damned, we want it now. So where did the fish go? Well, we forgot. They've been dying off year after year after year, and we forgot. We didn't notice the signs. We didn't recognize the cause or the problem. We didn't know how good it once was, and as such, we accepted things as they currently are. Daniel Pauly, a professor at the University of British Columbia, describes these acts of creeping amnesia. He calls this condition shifting baseline syndrome. Think of it like this. When you were young, you saw the world as its baseline normal. What is, has always been. Then things change during your lifetime, and you might regret what has changed, but for your children, born 30 years later into a more diminished world, what they see at 5 becomes their new normal. And so over time, normal is constantly being redefined to mean less. Those children accept that as the normal, and then when they have kids, there's even less, and they accept that as normal, and that's how we didn't notice. That's how this change happened without any of us realizing it. People who don't believe that the past was so different from the present might have what we call change blindness. Because these changes happen slowly over human lifetimes. They never startle us. They silently tiptoe along, helping us all adjust to a smaller, lesser world. Areas that swarm with a particular species hundreds of years ago may have experienced long-term decline, but to those born in its diminished state, they consider it to be the norm. The appropriate reference point is lost to time. This is how massive declines in ecosystems or species happen over long periods of time without any of us noticing. What a creepy thing to consider. Until next time, never stop searching.